Welcome to JasonWhiskyWise. My name is Jason. Welcome today to a whiskey review where I wanted to review something rather unique before we get into our next series, and that is this whiskey over here. It's an Irish whiskey and it's called the Glendalough 13-year-old Mizunara. So this is something that I've been tasting quite on and off for the last few months, and it's been a style of whiskey that has just been an eye-opener, especially when you taste loads of different whiskeys. You want to try something a bit different. Now, I believe it's the second Irish whiskey here on my channel. And if you guys would like to see more Irish whiskies, let me know in the comment section. I'm probably going to leave it as a question of the day. So, I poured myself a dram. Let's start talking about this expression. It is a 13-year-old whiskey. It's bottled at 46%. The actual cask maturation for this one is initially bourbon casks, and then it's then finished off in Japanese Mizunara oak casks. And Mizunara oak, for those of you that don't know or you haven't been to these warehouses which hold Mizunara casks, it's one of those cask type that are very porous, so it basically absorbs all the alcohol. It's like a sponge. And then what you'll find is that at the end of it, you'll actually see if you try to mature a whiskey for too long in it, the cask can sometimes even deteriorate and you'll see that it develops leaks. So it's a very interesting, and to perfectly find the exact perfect length of a maturation is something that many people are still experimenting with in Scotland and even the Japanese whiskey companies over in Japan. So, to get to the overall whiskey, it's actually from a company called Glendalough Irish Whiskey Limited. They're located in Wicklow, Ireland, and that's a bit south from Dublin. And then the price point on this bottle over here is around about £78. And I paid that. And actually, that's actually not my bottle. I want to say thank you to Jez, as actually I'm borrowing again another bottle from him, but I'll say thank you to him for that. I actually like this one so much, I went and picked up my own bottle, and it was one of those things where I said I couldn't miss out on the opportunity for really just sort of expressing how much this whiskey has a unique character to it. Now, in terms of exclusivity, I don't think it's exclusive because on their website they don't tell you a specific amount of bottles, but it's one of those things that you can expect because Japanese Mizunara casks don't come quite easily. Now, before I get into anything else, into the tasting notes, I want to explain to you about the person on the front of this box. And this is actually a person known as Saint Kevin. So he was from a royal family. I believe he was called a hermit monk. And he sort of just went into exile and started living off the land. And he was actually in Glendalough. Now, Glendalough, I believe, also translates into, I think it's called Glen of the Two Lakes. And in terms of where he actually, in Glendalough, he founded the monastery over there. So a lot of people went over there. And many people also asked me when I did tasting events, they said, Jason, why is he standing in this position? And that's actually his praying stance. So he used to pray like that with both his arms out. And one day a blackbird came and sat on his arm, or actually on his hand, and laid its egg. So he stayed in that position until it hatched. So the story says. So that's about it for St. Kevin. Let's get into this whiskey and find out what this one has on offer for the nose. So into the nose. So let's get things started on the nose. So beginning things on the nose, it's very different from your regular whiskies that are in sherry casks or in bourbon casks. The Mizunara oak imparts a very unique character, and for me it's got quite a refreshing sort of character to it. Almost a bit like pine needles. You've even got a little bit of, for me it's like freshly opened packet of bark chippings when you're doing your gardening. And there's a slight minty undernote to this as well. I'd say probably on the lines of spearmint as it sort of develops in the glass, and then it develops a slight note of something a bit more sweeter. There is almost that like a clotted cream sort of sweetness coming off from it, and a little bit of fudge mixed in together. And there is what, this is going to be interesting, but to me it's even like a slight waxy, sort of like a candle wax that's been burning out, and you don't smell the sort of the smoky aspect, the phenolic aspect, but you can smell that waxy character on this one. And there's a little bit of talking about phenolics, I'm actually getting what to me reminds me of like a little toasted creme brulee, a vanilla creme brulee top. That's about it for the nose. Let's get into the palate next. Sláinte. The character on arrival on the palate, it is so much more different. Normally, you don't expect something like a mint or something to be refreshing when you drink a whiskey. This one offers it up. It's almost got a mentholy character. For me, I actually want to say it's like that spearmint that's reflected off the nose, but it's like a spearmint, one of those spearmint thins that they used to do back in the day. And it's like one of those mints that are like a thin sheet, and you put it on your tongue, and it'll give you that little bit of spice initially at first, and then it'll give you that mentholy cooling character with that minty note lingering around with it. It then develops a slight herbal note, almost like fennel. And then you get the vanilla coming back in, and the vanilla is very consistent on this one. And there is a little sweetness on the end, but it's not, I'd say, it's not like a sweet, but it's almost like a fudge sweetness where it's not overly too much sweet on this whiskey. As you keep it there a little bit, I'm just letting it sort of a little bit residues on the sides of the cheeks hold itself there. And it's now become almost like a lime juice, but it's got a very nice velvety texture about it. I want to dive in for a second sip, but I think we should come to the next sip and we'll sort of get into our finish for this whiskey overall. So into the finish. So now into the finish for this whiskey. It's got quite a light, for me I'm getting that minty character still, but it's almost like you've eaten a pecan pie with a bit of walnuts on the top. And then it's got a sweetness that develops, and this is a fruity sweetness, almost like sultanas, quite succulent and juicy sultanas on the end, giving a very nice long finish to this whiskey. It's got such a unique flavor profile. It's just, I'm going to go for a second sip, well actually a third sip, and then I'll give you my rating for this whiskey. So now that I've finished my dram, let's give you my overall comments on this whiskey. So my rating wise, I'm giving this one over here a 95 out of 100. Now, some of you will say that's a very high score, and I'm going to explain behind it. This is one of those whiskeys that when I've tasted this year, and I've tasted quite a few whiskeys this year, maybe a couple hundred, this is one that's instantly given me that wow factor, and I was like, what am I drinking? And that's something that instantly I went and bought a bottle. Now, in terms of value for money at £78, it is up there around about £80, but I can justify that because it is a Mizunara oak finished whiskey, versus just being a regular sherry cask or a bourbon fully matured whiskey. And at the same time, combining the Irish smooth, rounded character of a whiskey and putting it together with Mizunara oak, I think these guys have done a perfect maturation. I've actually got a few other Mizunara finished whiskies coming up here on the channel in the upcoming month, but I think this is probably the best one that they found the perfect balance, not to go too much, not to go too little. Now, does it need water, does it need time? It's one that you can play around with because giving this one water, giving it time, doesn't really phase it too much. You'll probably just reduce a little bit of that mentholy character, but still making it so enjoyable. And I'm going to say this straight off the back, some people will like it, some people won't. Now, I did a tasting where a couple of people didn't like it because they didn't like that minty character to it. But then others, which I've done it for, they've absolutely adored it and want to go buy a bottle instantly. So I will say, take it with a pinch of salt if you do like that minty character in your whiskey, because it is something you don't normally get. And I actually want to say, I think Charles from Whiskey Untitled, Drinking Caveman, I gave him this in London and he straight away said, you know what, I want to take a bottle of this home back to America. And I was like, well, see, some people do. So let me know your thoughts on this one, guys. If you haven't tried this one, leave it down below in the comment section. If not, I've got a bottle. And actually, at one of my Whiskey Club meetups, I think I'm going to crack this open so everyone can taste it. And I want to see everyone's different opinions. I might do a video on that, maybe a live stream. So, on that note, I'm going to wrap the video at that. If you have enjoyed, drop it a thumbs up. Be sure to hit the like button. And I might leave some other videos on the screen. But this has been me, JasonWhiskyWise. Mr. Bananas has been very quiet. We'll catch you for the next video. Slàinte.